quietly do the work, it builds enormous confidence and self-esteem. You're not doing it for your Instagram followers. You're not doing it for whatever. Quietly, I said the best feeling that I've ever had in my whole life was crossing the finish line in Antigua. But ask what it feels like to row an ocean. I say, it's in me. You can't take that away from me. I've lived this experience. I didn't do it for light. It shaped me in a positive way, and you can't take it away from me. And I think in a world, no one's going to care about the car you drive, the house you live.
All right. What is up, passion seekers? So I'm excited. Like always, we always have these really fun guests. Especially excited about today and intrigued, and I hope y'all are as well. I have a man that rode across the Atlantic. Yes, rode. He's an entrepreneur, business CEO, and has incredible stories and an adventurous. Ben Towle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, rode across the Atlantic. I kind of want to kick off with that. I mean, that's a big thing. Not many people wake up every single day and like, I want to row across the Atlantic. What inspired that?
Yeah, well, not many people. More people have been to Everest, more people have been to space than rowed an ocean. So about 1,000 people in history have ever rowed across an ocean. And so I'll take you back to when the sort of seed was planted. So 2020, we're in the middle of the pandemic. I'm in the restaurant business. Thanks for having me. And so a lot of people in our industry just world fell apart. We owned restaurants in New York, the UK, Savannah, and Charleston, and pretty over leveraged. Just, we were flying, and then suddenly there wasn't a world that I thought every single thing that we owned would go to zero.
Wow. Yeah.
And it did. So during that time, it was kind of just like fighting to kind of see what was going on. Every state had different policies. I mean, the UK, my brother and I owned 2 restaurants together, and so he was dealing with that. Some things were just getting going. And so I'm walking on the beach one day, I'm just gonna my wife's pregnant with our second kid, my son's 3, and I'm just thinking, man, how am I gonna get through this? Like, I'm not being a great leader. We had about 350 employees, and drinking too much. Just like, man, stuff's not working.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm on this beach walk, and when you're in these times where you're kind of like sink or swim, for me, I always go and I say, man, I got to take back control.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who rode across the Atlantic Ocean in 2013, and it was a crazy story. He rode through 2 hurricanes, and he came out the other side, and he sent me an email. And he's like, man, I just rode across the Atlantic. I was like, no way. So I looked it up. I sort of got really into this idea of what it would feel like and what that journey would be like. And so it was there on that walk. I said, man, I'm going to row across the Atlantic Ocean. I came back. I told my wife.
How is that response?
Yeah, so imagine again, like, I don't know if rowing across the Atlantic is going to solve our problems, but what it did, and I'll say this to anyone listening who sometimes faces these sort of challenging times, is you kind of recenter your effort, right? So you take a big idea and you work backwards from it, and so everything else kind of fit into place. So you start looking after yourself, you start making training work. You're like, right, I got to focus on getting this company back on track. I'm going to navigate COVID. I'm going to be fitter, healthier, stronger, both mentally and physically. And so that began a 2-year journey, and it takes about 2 years to prepare for an expedition.
Yeah. So, which kind of segues me right into the next where I kind of wanted to go. Physically, that's to train for that. Like I've done half marathon, so I'm relating to a half marathon. Nowhere quite the same, but like training for a half marathon is physically just difficult. But the other aspect that's really difficult is mentally. How do you mentally train for something that big?
Well, I think so. Take this sort of hand in hand. So. You got to be focused, and you got to be disciplined, and you got to start at the finish line, right? So you're like, you got to set, like, this goal is 3,000 miles, and you got to think, I'm at the finish line. All right. So what does that feel like? What do I need to get to the finish line? And then you just start working backwards. And you got to surround yourself with great people. So first thing I did, I rode as a pair. And so first thing I did is pick a great partner.
Yeah.
Like, what does being a great partner look like? What does it look like in business? What does it look like in life? What does it look like in an adventure like this? You got to complement each other. You got to be able to have really tough conversations.
And like some people can't do it like a 2-day weekend trip with some of their friends because like you're trapped in like one room. And that's like, how many days are you on the water?
Yeah. So we plan to be at sea for up to 80 days, 75 to 80 days.
Wow.
We were at sea for 40 days. We're actually the fastest pair that year and probably the 10th fastest pair in history to row the Atlantic. So we came in 40 days, 8 hours and something, 12 minutes. But we had enough provisions for about 70 days. But let me just tell you about the partner.
Yeah.
What it looked like. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I want to do something hard, I want to do it with someone. One of the things when you're rowing across the Atlantic is as soon as you set off from land, you're on your own. No one can help you. No one can give you stuff. You're in a 24-foot rowing boat. You row 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24 hours a day. So at most you sleep for probably an hour and 20 minutes.
Oh God.
And we were at 24 hours a day. So there's never a period where you slept for more than that, for 40, 50, 60, 70 days, however long it takes. And during that time, you're in a high stress environment. So going through storms, stuff breaks, you get hit, you see big wildlife, like really crazy stuff happens when you're out there.
Yeah.
And you're functioning on very, very little sleep. So imagine if your partner, your wife or whoever, imagine what you're like in that environment where you really haven't slept for a month. So you're functioning in a certain level, you're hallucinating a lot. So you have to have all these really hard conversations before you set off. So I'm going to give you an example. I have young children. You have to talk about what happens if something happens to one of my kids. Do I want to know? Because there's nothing I can do. So,
wow.
So you start having those conversations with your partner and you go deep on the stuff. And you say, hey, I'm so sleep deprived. I'm seeing squirrels on the boat, right? And you need to like take control of me because I know there aren't, like, I'm seeing traffic wardens, or just things that aren't there.
Yeah.
And so one of you then has to say, hey man, like we talked about this before we left. Like you got to this is what you.
How do you even venture? Like one, I guess my question is like, where do you find people that compatible or that willingly to have those?
See it in your everyday life. Think of friends, right? You all got friends. You all got or people you grew up with. There's some people who are just built and they just got grit.
Yeah,
and they got grit. You see it in sports. You see it in work. You see it in academia. They're not physically the best always. They've got what I just call grit. They're tough. Sometimes it's shaped by an experience in their own life, a personal experience. Sometimes you just got it. And I'm talking when people who are like, they get good on mile, let's say you're doing a 100-mile bike ride. People who are like, yeah, they're okay. 50, they're not on the thing, but they get good at like mile 75.
Yeah.
When everyone else starts. And so that's what you look for. And actually with Charlie, who's my partner, I saw it in the pandemic because when we were going through what we were going through in the restaurant business, Charlie was just digging deep and we were on life support in our business. So he'd work through the night. There would be one person to show up. It'd always be Charlie. I just saw this guy who just big heart, kind, but really, really tough. And someone who we could have a really honest conversation with, who didn't mind feedback, right? So when you have to sit in a room and say, hey, tell me everything that annoys you about me, right?
And that's a vulnerable and tough, like most people can't take that criticism.
You're like, what? So that's the sort of stuff we do. And so that's a really special relationship. So in ocean rowing, the big thing that can go wrong is the breakdown of your relationship, right? You got to do this thing together.
Yeah.
There is nowhere to hide. We're sitting in a chair right now and you can see this chair if you're watching. Imagine sitting in this chair for 40 days and you sit in front of me and that's the space that we're dealing with. We have set a little pod behind us. That's the space that we're living on.
Gosh.
And so you and I, we better work some stuff out and feel like we got it. Because if you need to get past me, you have to go over the top of me, right? And more than not, you're not wearing any clothes.
God. So
It's tight.
gosh. So basically about this width, just right. Wow.
Go to the gym and sit on a rowing machine and sit on that rowing machine for what, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Yeah, we sat on that rowing machine for 40 days. Every 2 hours, off on it, on, off, on. And we row for 2 hours. You row your heart out and then go back into a hot, smelly cabin, which was airtight, which was a tiny little vent.
So, I mean, one, finding a partner,
Yes.
which, I mean, we hear that in business all the time. Find your niche, find your community, lean into those, which, I mean, I think that's more in this situation, so prevalent how it relates back over to business.
Yeah.
But what are the other ways? Because I know like partner's one of them, but what are some of the other things that you did?
So in terms of preparing, so mentally preparing. So I think you got to start doing. Let's take your half marathon.
Mm-hmm.
You don't start training for a half marathon by running 13.6 miles.
13.2.
13.2.
Yeah.
So you don't start there. You run 2 miles. You run 1 mile. So that's where you get to, right? So you're saying I'm going to row 3,000 miles. You start by I'm going to row for 2 hours, then I'm going to row for 4 hours, and then I'm going to row for 6, and then I'm going to 12, and then I'm going to go out for a 24-hour period. Then I'm going to start rowing from Florida, right, to Charleston. It takes about 3 to 4 days. Right?
Wow.
So first time you go offshore, 26 miles, you get everything wrong. It's a nightmare. You're scared. And you leave Jekyll Island or in Georgia, I think it is, and you go left. You're 26 miles, 28 miles offshore, hang a left, row for 3 days, go through some storms, see some stuff, get your nutrition wrong, and then you get into Charleston and you think, whoa, oh my God, I can't believe how happy I am to be here. That was a nightmare. And then you fix all the little things, you have a really honest conversation, and you go again, and you go again. And you start just dialing it in. So when you get to the start line, you say, hey, I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, cause like going from Charleston to Florida, that's not even like halfway.
Yeah, Charleston, Florida is it's probably a couple hundred miles, maybe 300 miles. And we were 3,000 miles.
That's not even close to halfway.
But the learning comes in that first 3-4 days when you do something. So get your systems right, get your nutrition right, get your routine right. What is it? I'm very seasick. So in the first 8 days at sea,
I guess you can be on
I'm
that.
throwing up a lot.
Yeah.
What does that feel like? How do you row while you're so seasick? So what do patches do to you? So you just start, you got to do, in order to have growth, you got to start. And a lot of people don't start because they're afraid.
Yeah.
And so one of the big lessons you learn in ocean rowing, or you learn any big thing like this, is just start. Just run your first mile. Just row your first 10 minutes. Just get up at 4 a.m. See what that feels like.
Yeah.
Start training, because that's what we're doing. And then things start falling into place. And that's where toughness comes through and grit.
Yeah, which I love that you mentioned grit, because I mean, some people, I feel like that term's used so loosely, like, oh, you got to have grit. But I don't think people understand the weight of what grit really is. Like, I really, like, that was my whole life, is like, I'm not going to be the smartest kid in the room, but I can sure tell you that I'm going to work the hardest and I'm going to do the best. And I'm, whatever it is, like, put your head down, don't ask questions, just get it done and grind it out. And I don't think people understand that, and like what grit really, really is. And I think it's necessary for business. Like, COVID happened. You got to have grit. Like, because I was listening to someone the other day, and it says, if you're going to quit when it's good, because everybody can quit when it's bad. Like, that's the easy time to quit. But if you're quit, no one's going to quit when they're, their business is profiting $100,000 and they're, sitting on cloud nine. So, I think it's like, when the tough times do come, you got to have grit to persevere through the tough times, because right around the corners, the sitting on cloud nine, prospering. So kind of with that, you've hit on a little bit, I don't want to get too far off track, but you've hit a little bit on the challenges that you face. So like one of them being seasick. I mean, you're on a little rowboat. Like I've gotten seasick on a cruise ship. So it's like, you put that in perspective of what that actually is and actually going through storms. Where was your mindset at, like when those challenges happened? Because that's when you really had to dig in and have that grit.
Right. So you have, I'll take you the arc of some of the challenges. So there's a saying in ocean rowing, the hardest thing is getting to the start line.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So hardest thing getting to the start line, which means I can't tell you the journey of trying to get a boat built. I'm just a boat built in the UK during COVID, shipped over here, training on it, shipping it back to just off the coast of Africa, getting physically fit, getting mentally prepared, fundraising. We raised $175,000 for charity.
Wow.
We raised probably $200,000 in sponsorship to put this campaign together. I mean, this is a huge ordeal. All the setbacks that happen along the way there, especially with COVID happening. Then you get to the start line and you set off and you think, oh, I just got to row every day to get across. And then some of the things kick in. For me, seasickness, so chronically seasick, 5-6 days, couldn't eat, throwing up. Weight, I dropped down to probably 170 from 200.
Wow.
Just in pieces. So Charlie actually stepped up at that point, saw how much I was struggling, and then wrapped me up in my foul weather clothes, wrapped me up in a thermal sleeping bag, and he rode through the night. And then I slept for 6 hours solid, and then I could start eating again. And then because what you really need is warmth, food.
Yeah.
So then I started coming out the other side, putting weight back on, eating, and then we were off again. So that's number one big challenge. Then the second thing is the first big storm you go through, right? So
That's what I'm really curious of.
yeah. So what does that feel like? So people say facing your fear, right? Well, if you're a tiny little boat and you're rowing and a storm is coming behind you, and it's a 5-day weather system, and you get in that weather report, you're going through it. Like
Yeah.
no other way. So you suddenly have maybe 24, 36 hours to think, oh my God, this is coming. I know this is coming. And that fear, that's what, I mean, I've never been more afraid of an unknown. And actually, I called on the satellite phone to a rowing coach that we had. And he said, man, we put so much training in. I do not wish this away. You just got to go through the systems, be tethered on. And so we did. We rode through that storm, and we didn't, if you're rowing, I'm sorry, there's a lot of rowing terminology, but if you go through a storm, you have something called a para anchor, and you put it under the water. It's a big parachute, and it stops you drifting if the storm's going to push you one way or the other that you don't want to go. So you can deploy that para anchor, and it holds you in place, and it holds you into the wind, and it means you just like bob up and down.
How big were the swells?
So we had about 30 to 35 foot waves, which is about 70 foot face.
Gosh.
So huge rolling seas
in a rowboat.
in a 24-foot rowing boat with 40, 50 mile an hour winds, or not winds. On the 5th day of the storm, we capsized. We capsized coming down a huge wave because we never deployed our para anchor. And at one point, Charlie and I the boat is upside down, and we're both in the water, and we're looking up, and it's just this chaos of a sea. And they're both self-rights. We lost a couple of oars and all the stuff on deck, but our boat self-righted. And then we climbed on, and next thing you know, you're underway again. And that night was probably the most frightening night at sea.
Would you say that was the biggest challenge?
No, so that was big challenge number 2. And then we're just at sea, grinding it out, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on. We had a saying on our boat, and it said, a happy boat is a fast boat. So we had a great time. We listened to great music. We enjoyed our meals. We'd cooked we were eating 8,000 calories a day.
Gosh.
Food's a big part of it. And then what happened at maybe day 30, our rudder snapped off in the middle of the night. And we weren't sure what had happened, but we were just getting smashed around. And so what had happened is our rudder had been cracked by a marlin. We'd been struck by a marlin on day 5. And so rudder had come off. And so I had to swim underneath. We had luckily packed a spare rudder. Very few boats before had done that. And we managed to rig up a collar from duct tape and lubricant from beeswax from our hands and put a rudder. And I'm talking you have to swim under the boat, tethered to the boat. It's probably 3-4 miles deep below you.
Which, I mean, terrifying alone.
And if you drop this rudder, which you've also got holding in your hand, tethered to you, you're lost. I mean, that's it. You're out. So you can't drop the rudder, and you put it.
I'm like anxious just listening to this.
And it's dark, so you're wearing a head torch. It's just kind of scary. Just like it's like the depths of the sea. You're just thinking. And then you come back, and the sea's big. I mean, we're talking 10, 15 foot seas at this point. So it's not like you're doing this in a swimming pool. And that was probably, so we fixed that. It took about 6 hours. And that was 100% the hairiest time we had at sea. We fixed it. We were underway, and I think we had to fix it one more time with about 500 miles to go. I had to jump in and adjust the duct tape that was kind of.
So when you jump in, you're holding the rudder in one hand, which, I mean, don't drop it.
Do not drop
and is your partner still rowing?
No, we're immobile because we have no way. We are literally a rudderless ship, hence the expression. And so we are beam onto the sea, so we're just getting smacked by big waves that break at the top. And we're trying to fix this so we can kind of get back on the wet, and start following the currents.
Gosh, yeah. I mean,
I hope you're feeling your palms sweating.
My palms are literally sweating. Because I'm sitting here thinking about, like, one, I've been born and raised in Charleston my entire life. I grew up boating. I grew up going, on cruise ships, all that stuff. I've been out into the ocean, and the one thing that has the most terrifying thing has always been the ocean, because it's a fact that we have explored space more than we have our own ocean. So one, that's just terrifying in general. Like, this is something that you can go to, you can see, you can touch, you can feel. Half the people in this world haven't been, more than half, haven't been to the space. So that's terrifying. So being able, and were you having to fix the rudder at night?
Yeah, it's probably coming up to, for us, night. It was probably started at 3-4 in the morning when we noticed we had no ability to steer the boat.
Oh, so, God.
Then, as it was sunrise is probably 6:30. So we had from 4 to 6 while we're trying to fix it, trying to work it out. Sun comes up and we start really getting to it. Interesting. So my experience with and again, for people who are sometimes think about this when you hear a big windy storm at night. So when you're out at sea, you go through your cycles of the moon, but the moon is so wildly bright out at sea because there's no light pollution. So the moon would actually charge our solar. On a full moon, we would be charging our solar panels at night from the moon.
No way.
And so the night, actually, people think the night would be scary, but after a while, the night becomes your best bit. It's so hot in the day, and you have to do all the chores, and you have to clean the boat and do all the stuff but at night, it's cool. It's very peaceful. You get this, you're right. You get to see the night sky. You see millions of shooting stars and meteor showers and just crazy stuff.
Really?
So the sky is really beautiful. The night was our favorite. We used to set ourselves these really ambitious goals and mileage at night and competitions and stuff. It was so cool.
That's awesome. I mean, so yeah, that's a perspective that I've never thought of. Because I'm not out in the middle of the ocean, typically out night stranded, but so, like, with that moment being like the biggest challenge, and I said earlier, like, the easiest time to give up is when it's the hardest. Why, like, what kept you from giving up in that moment?
Yeah, there's no giving up. It's life or death. So
that is true.
Just to think about that. Yeah. What does giving up look like at sea? Giving up means being rescued by a large vessel, which means leaving your vessel, your safe, lovely home, and trying to board another vessel on a rope ladder. And the only so you always had tied. We wear a harness, a climbing harness, for the whole time, because if you go overboard, which we did, you'd be lost at sea immediately unless you're tethered to your boat, because there's just no way with the way the ocean is and the currents, you can't swim back to your boat. Once you're gone, you're gone. And so you're tethered the whole time, never not clipped in, even when you sleep. So yeah, abandoning your boat looks like someone else putting their life at risk to come and rescue you, and then there's a moment where you're unclipped and you have to grab a rope ladder at sea with the sea moving, and that in itself is so.
That alone is terrifying.
Your safest, best thing to do is to row to the destination.
Just finish. Yeah.
Finish. And the finish line is Antigua, and you just crack on.
Wow. Now, I mean, for how many days were y'all at sea?
Yeah, so 40 days.
40 days. Okay, that's right.
Biblical.
So, yeah, seriously, 40 days. And I mean, most people can't commit to a goal for 15 days.
Yeah.
What's the January, the famous January, everybody starts their New Year's resolution. And I think it's like everybody will commit to them for the first 15 days. And then after that, it fizzles out. So one, you had 2 years of planning. So that's one. Then you were at 40 days at sea where you had to stay committed to your goal. Where was your motivation? Like what was your motivation?
Yeah, I'm a very focused. So like when you set your mind to something, I've done it in business my life. We've had success in the hospitality world. I'm just once I say I'm doing it. I rode my bike across the US, writing stories for the New York Times on positive food story. Like I say I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I was committed to rowing across the Atlantic Ocean. We did all the preparation. We spent more hours than you can imagine preparing for it, physically, mentally. I still had a normal job and a young family, but I was just focused on, if I had to work out at 4 a.m., that's what we're doing. Sit on the rower, no headphones, just grind it out 2 hours. So when I set off, I had a goal, and that was to get us across the Atlantic as quickly and as safely as quickly and safely as possible while enjoying it.
Yeah.
And as I said, I had a 5-year-old son, and I had a 2-year-old daughter. And I lost my dad when I was 5, and so I was very aware of that, and I was going to return home safely.
It's a pretty strong motivation.
To my young son, and see them in Antigua, and that's what kept us focused and motivated. And Charlie and I, were never late for a shift. We have 3 words, so I'm going to tell you some things. We have a mission statement, which I told you is to row as quickly as safely as possible across the Atlantic while having fun, and raise as much money for the Green Heart as possible. So that was our mission statement. We had 3 words we live by: accountability, execution, and enjoyment. So accountability was, and we literally had those on the boat in front of us every day. Accountability, life or death stuff.
Yeah.
Never late for a shift, never late for a training session, never late for a sponsor. I'm accountable. My life is in your hands. When I'm sleeping, you're accountable. Execution, we've prepared, we've done the work. Now get out there and execute the plan. And the plan, as I said, what it was. And enjoyment. And if you're not enjoying stuff, you're in the wrong place. So make sure it's fun. Every morning we do one thing. This is a great trick if you're managing teams. We'd turn and we'd face each other. We'd have breakfast as the sun was coming up, 15 minutes, and talk about the day, talk about problems. And so in rowing, your back's always to one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'd turn and look at each other and say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? What are you seeing? What's the night? And that was very effective.
Really? How so?
Because sometimes you don't stop and look at each other and say, like, because your hands might be infected. You had terrible issues with your bum.
God.
Sores. Yeah. And so you'd have to say, like, hey man, how are you doing? Or you might have had, like, you might be missing home. You might be so tired, thinking about your kids, you just might be struggling, just having a tough night, and you got to check in with your partner.
So I'm going to kind of take this off script a little bit, but so one, how did this situation, learning with your partner, have an influence on your marriage? Like how did that affect?
Yeah, so again, number one question I always get asked is, why did your wife let you do it?
Yeah,
I think
it's a great question.
And so I sort of flip that script, and you got to how does it affect my marriage? It strengthened it. I had to do a lot of planning. Time became, very important to us. We had really hard conversations. It was, again, what Kate did I was away for 2.5 months, and again, she was doing stuff looking after her family. And I'm just in the middle of the Atlantic on a rowing boat. Like, that's how she would wake up, and we'd get reports that we'd capsized, or we're going through a big 5-day storm, and she would have to go to bed every night. So she's very strong. We talked a lot about what that looked like, and we really support one another. Like, I love doing this stuff, and Kate, when Kate wants to do things, I encourage and support it. I think it's a real danger when people think like, you can't do that now. Or we stifle one another in relationships, rather than like, hey, go and do that. Like, I'm running a marathon a month at the moment, and I just ran 3 marathons back to back, and I love that stuff.
Yeah.
So instead of Kate saying like, no, you don't do that, don't take that week off, it's like, no, you go and do that. There's some certain responsibilities come with that freedom.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really important to remember who you married.
Yeah, and I think we're going to kind of go back into business. I think, your biggest asset to when you're creating a business is who your spouse, like if you're married, it's who your spouse is. Because I've noticed it in my life. Like when I was starting in real estate, I was in corporate. I was in corporate roofing. I was regional manager for the East Coast, and I lost my job. So I was like, all right, real estate it is. Low barriers of entry. And I was like, let's do it. I've always wanted to. But it's full commission. I was used to getting a nice salary and like being content. When you switch that, it's really, you have to like have a good partner, because for real estate, like I went 6 months, not a single paycheck. So my wife knew that this is what I wanted to do. So she went and got the job and carried the weight for the family, which was humbling for me, because I was always like, oh, I'm going to be the breadwinner. I'm going to be this. I'm going to do this. And like, you never have to worry. But like, it's really like, to have that freedom, you have to have that type of partner in business. Like if you want to start something, like have that good partner with you. Because I always used to think like relationships 50-50. Like I'll give 50%, you give 50%. But then my mindset shifted when I got married. I was like, no, it's 100%. I give 100% and she gives 100%. But when I can't carry the 100%, she's going to have to give more. She's going to have to give 150% when I can't give that. And I was like, it was a eye-opening experience when that happened. And I think that's why I was like, when you were talking about finding the partner and everything, I just thought about like, entrepreneurs that go out and start their own business. If they don't have that right partner, I mean, it's going to reflect in the business.
100%. End up at some point.
Yeah. And so I think that's really cool. But kind of getting back on topic, I really love that. And so like, I mean, this whole moment, I also don't want to take away, like we've been talking a lot that he rode across the Atlantic. I like that story because like we're on the Atlantic. It's like the ocean's right here. But you also, correct me if I'm wrong, you biked across America, the U.S. So like this man and done 3 marathons back to back, which I've done half marathon, and that was just brutal. That's incredible. I love that. I like to think that I'm, adventurous and like to achieve those goals, but like I capped out at a half marathon. That's where I love to work out. I hate to run. And I did a half marathon because I was like, I'm just going to do it because I hate it. I loved it. But like now it's like thinking of when I finished the half marathon, I was like, think about like doing this again in the same amount of time and all that stuff. I was like, this is brutal. But
Well, just on that note, though, I just see someone who wants to do this. Like, okay, you're talking about your half marathon. See, I would just say, like, I think you do your half, and then you think you could say, "Oh, doing this all again," or I look at it, I'm like, "Man, I'm halfway. I'm halfway there.
man,
This is
freaking
great."
humbling me over here.
No,
No,
no, but I
seriously.
think it's important because I've just been running this. I don't particularly like running, but I like the distance of a marathon because it's hot. It's 20 miles is doable. 26.2 is it's just that last bit is tough. And
Yeah.
it's tough for anyone, and it's you just it's a grind at some point. So it's nice. It's whatever it is.
I will say the best part of my half, one, I did the Charleston half, which was my favorite one.
January.
Yeah. That was my favorite one ever. I did the Myrtle Beach half. So I've done 2 half marathons, but the Myrtle Beach half I didn't love. The Charleston Marathon, my favorite. Such an easy, such a great run. But my thing, how I always did, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. That's always been something that I've always said. So like, instead of like, it's so tempting, like the last mile, oh, you know, I'm doing good on time, I'm just going to walk and like, you know, enjoy it. But I did that on the Myrtle Beach one because it was my first. And then the Charleston one, I was a mile in and I was really mad at my time that I got at the Myrtle Beach one. So I had a mile left and I was like, no, I'm just going to full on sprint. I look like an idiot. Like I'm like full on like looking like I'm doing the sprints. But when I finished running full speed, it was the biggest adrenaline high that I've ever received. And you know, that's where I kind of like lean into the grit. It's like when life's hard, when life feels like, you know, it's over and all that stuff, it's not like, don't give up, just hit it harder. Like, cause it's when you accomplish, it feels so good. So like with that, I mean, you've accomplished a lot in business, in adventures. I mean, yeah, I mean, biking across America is one thing. Rowing across the Atlantic, I mean, that's a whole other ball game and a whole other thing from my perspective. But long-term goals, I have a saying, and you've kind of hit on systems, which I really love. I have a saying that your goals are only as good as your systems. If you're not achieving your goals, then you don't have good systems. So like that was, I mean, 2 years in the making for planning for this. How do you build out a good system? Because you never rode across the Atlantic before. So where did you get this structure?
So yeah, we find you gotta seek out people, experts, people who've done something before, people who are, you know, in that field. So for us, find the best ocean rowing coach you can, and we did.
It's pretty niche.
Duncan Roy, incredible guy, great friend. Dunk has rowed across the Atlantic twice, the Pacific once, holds the world record for the Pacific, and he rowed around the UK. And so I contacted him, and he came out to Charleston. We spent like a week together, super intense, just no sleep, just ocean rowing 101. And then he coached us from afar. And then we got a great physical trainer in Jackson Metcalf, and Jackson put together a pretty simple but effective program of how to get yourself, you know, rowing is in anything you do is called fit for purpose, right? So you don't need to be a good runner to be a good rower.
Yeah.
You need to be good cardio, but you need to be strong. You need to be able to move a 1-ton boat through the water. So
1 ton is how much that thing weighed?
yeah, so it's just all legs or deadlift.
Oh God.
You have to have a super strong core because ocean rowing is not a lake. You're moving
Yeah.
the whole time. So you do that for 2 hours, your core is destroyed. So we did like the same exercises week in, week out, heavier volume. And then lastly, which people don't think about, is mobility. So we did endless mobility stretching sessions, and we do probably maybe 3 hour-and-a-half sessions a week of just intense stretching on hips. And so because that's what goes on a 40-day grind, your body falls apart. It's just about maintenance. How can I prepare for what I know will go wrong and limit the pain that I'm going to have?
Which is an interesting perspective. So you're basically, I mean, I'm going to figure out how to articulate this in a way. So, I mean, yeah, so you're preparing for the worst scenarios.
Your body will fall apart. So you got to think, you're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
You're going to lose a lot of weight. It's inevitable. And you are going to suffer. And you're going to, so first thing you're going to suffer is your hands. The next thing to suffer is your, like your skin, just because the salt water eats away your skin. You're going to get terrible boils and blisters.
Oh God.
So you and then your hips are going to, like your hips. So you just got to start thinking about how can I work on that. So I'm tough in my hands. I'm super flexible, because at no point do you ever stand up for 40 days. You're creeping around like you.
So you never like just stood up, extended. I mean, your knees were already extended, but like just standing up.
It's very good. You're at sea. I mean, you're just holding on tight to. So yeah, so you start thinking about that and preparing for that. So, food, 8,000 calories a day. You can't just be like.
I'm very interested in that. How do you 8,000 calories a day? Which, I mean, makes sense with how much energy you're exerting, even with the rocking motion. But how do you fit 8,000 calories for 40 days on that boat?
So each day you have a pack. Each person has a pack, and you build out your calories from that. So you have 3 camping meals. So if you think stuff you might take camping when you hydrate. So, but then snacks, and then 1 high calorie drink, which we had. Something called Mass Gainer, which is 1,000 calorie shake.
Jeez.
So yeah, you do this, but I just, again, when you're preparing, people don't think about stuff. It's like, it's the detail, right? So what food do you like and what do you not like? So you got to eat all that food and test it. And how does it make you feel? Right? So like, if you think, man, I love this stuff. Well, you're going to eat that same breakfast for 40 days with those calories. Does that sit well with your stomach or not?
Yeah.
And so you got to test your food. You got to test your hydration. You got to test. So when you're out at sea, you're not like, man, I hate this mac and cheese, but I've got like 50 of these packets, right?
Could you imagine that, eating the same thing you hate for? Oh God.
Right, and then find the joy and stuff. So like, every day in your snack pack, you have a little treat, and every 500 miles you have a can of Coke, and just little things that you like, little simple pleasures out there.
Which I live by that, because I mean, I have a saying that, life's hard. Like, there's no way around it. Life's hard, but like finding the enjoyment in the small details. Like, you may hate your job, but find the one thing like you really enjoy. Like, maybe it's just like you have like 5 minutes to yourself. Maybe that's something that you just find enjoyment. Maybe it's just cutting up and having fun. Life's stressful, like, so it's not like worrying about things. And it's hard to, easier said than done. Being stressed, the biggest stress in life right now is finances. I would say that's the number one biggest stressor. It's the number one biggest thing of divorce. So finances, like, there's no point in worrying about it, because like, you can sit here and think about, I need more money. Well, go out and do what you need to do to make more money, but just be confident that it is what it is. Yeah. You can't change it. You can't fix it. Just do what you need to do. So I love that, like finding the joy, and especially in something that's like, I can tell you right now, like rowing 40 days, there's not, it would not be for me, but like, it would be hard to try to find the joy in that when you feel like, your boat capsizes, you're going through a storm. It'd be hard to find like excitement in that.
Well, again, I think anything in life, if you sign up for it, you chose to be there. So like, you got to remind yourself that like, no one forced you to be there.
Yeah. And
so it was a choice. It was a journey. It was something that will shape you forever. And I always say, when you get there, there's the scary bits, there's the beautiful night sky, there's peace, there's all these amazing things that come from it. There's lots of kind of great metaphors. There's the preparation that no one really sees. No one was there during that preparation. They see the finish line picture and they think, wow, that must feel fantastic.
I want to hit on that. One, talking about like, no, do I think rowing across the ocean is for me? No. Do I feel like I want to do it now? Yeah, kind of. But that's kind of what we talked about it on the phone. You mentioned it and it really kind of stuck with me. It's like, no one sees the 2 years of just grinding it out and preparing. They see the finish line. And I feel like that's a lot of way with life. A lot of people see successful people and like, oh, well, I can get that. But it's like, okay, well, you didn't see the 3 years or the 5 years or the year of actual, just head down grinding that I did to get here.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's so big. How, like, I guess my question is like, how do you cope with that in the sense of like, the pride is in the work that you do. I would say, like for me as a person, like I would be prideful that I took 2 years and trained for this, but no one really draws attention to that. Where's your mindset in that area? And that's where it's like, no, I said I'm going to do something. I'm going to keep that promise to myself because one, I would say it makes you a better human because you're able to keep promises to the people around you as well. So we've been talking a lot about rowing, and I would say rowing, and we could nitpick rowing and all the things that you've got from it and how it relates to business, but specifically like building out long-term goals for rowing, there's a lot of similarities to like building out long-term goals for a business, leading a business, leading your wife and all these other accolades. But like, so you're a business CEO. How did rowing across the Atlantic influence your business decisions, your leadership positions as well?
Yeah, so we definitely made some changes, and we continue to do that. And I think I just think about how do we become more efficient. And I say efficient. I'm going to use the analogy of rowing. Just it's easier.
Yeah.
So you can only have the things that you really need on that boat. There's no fluff. Like there's no luxury. It's just really what do I need? And so I think about that with what we're doing. We're really focusing on streamlining, and then how we were working as a team in a lot of teamwork, and so communication's really we're working a lot on communication in the restaurant business, and then again back to that discipline. It's just like about consistency and showing up, and for me, I generally think no problems too big to tackle because coming out of the other side of COVID, because of rowing, I just think, man, just what's the problem? Let's work out how to fix it. And so Charlie thinks like that. I think like that. I've certainly streamlined. I think relationships in business are very important, and so yeah, no, I have a saying, so I got no dead weight, right? So that's really important. So there's been a lot of ways that we have changed our business as a result of this journey, and continue to streamline things. We're growing as a company, and I think a lot about what that growth looks like, and how does it make sense. It's very easy to kind of be pulled in a lot of different. It's very easy to kind of be pulled in a lot of different directions.
There's so many distractions in this world.
We're trying to keep on those tracks, and as I told you, fit for purpose, right? So like, if you're trying to row the Atlantic, you don't need to be a great runner. If you're trying to like be this restaurant group, you don't need to worry about X. So that's what I'm trying to think.
I like that. I like that a lot because I think a lot of business owners, especially realtors, I've noticed a lot lately, which I hate. A lot of realtors are always focused on what their competition's doing. Yeah. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, focus on what you need to do. Maybe figure out what they're doing good at and try to either perfect it or learn from it or learn what you're not doing, but don't focus on them.
Yeah, I say row your own race. I never, I don't say never. It's not like I'm not inspired by other people in our industry, in hospitality, but I never look to imitate them, and just never have. Not interested.
Yeah.
Just focus on yourself. Row your own race. Get great advice from people who are smarter than you, but yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah, because I mean, your business, like for your business and my real estate business, they want to work with me. They don't want to work with my competition, because if they did, then they would just go with my competition.
Right. And you're in a relationship business and delivering on that.
Yeah. So I think that was really cool. Like, I mean, you talked about like, rowing your own race, and you talked a lot about discipline and focus, which I think is I mean, something that I try to implement on a daily basis, but discipline specifically, what's the one thing that you would say that you do every single day in your business or in your personal life that's added tremendous amount of success?
Yeah, I think this is, I personally gonna go out on a limb and say, like, I can sit here and say discipline, and I think people, especially with the way we consume podcasts and social media, everyone's thinking everyone's getting up at 5 a.m. they're reading their book, and I call BS on this stuff because I don't think it's realistic. I think you got to, there are some core values that you have, but I think life, especially people in the creative field, it ebbs and flows. So like, you'll become hyper focused for a period of time, but you can't, it's not sustainable. I don't believe anyone's doing that their entire life, and if they are, I think they're probably boring. Like, I think if you say, okay, like for when I was rowing, wildly focused, nothing's getting in the way. Right now, I'm looking for my next thing. So
Yeah.
am I a fairly structured, disciplined person? I am. We have a great business, have a great family, and that comes with responsibilities, and I'm very focused on that. So I get up early and do all the good things. You exercise regularly, but like, you're not doing that whole time. When I see people saying, you're just not. And if
You got to get up at 5 a.m., read your book, write this.
I think we set these wildly unrealistic expectations. I think a lot of people are struggling. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it's like, man, if you're like, for me, I've done a lot of stuff, but like, if I get a certain amount of like miles in walking, like I love to, for me, it's like, that's a great, I've achieved something. Like, I'm like, man, if I walk 10 miles a day, like if I leave my car and I walk, I drop my kids at school and I walk and I do this stuff and I finish my day and I've done my day and I've walked 10 miles, I'm like, nailed it. Like, nailed my day. This is coming from somebody who would do a lot more stuff previously, but like, set your expectations. What's a win for you for a period of time, and like, if I walk twice a week with my wife, right, and that's how we're communicating, we're winning. And so you got to keep shifting them, right? So that you go through a period like that while you set your next thing, and then you go through maybe 6-12 months of like, man, I'm working towards a goal. For you, it's going to be running a marathon.
Well, listen, Kiowa is right around the corner.
I'll be doing it. So you can do
I was fixing to freaking sign up, but I have a wedding. I was so upset. I was trying to figure out how I could go like run the marathon and then like go to the wedding.
Athens, Georgia. I've just done every one a month. So Athens is in January. You can do that one. You can do Austin in February.
Listen, this is just motivating me. I'm like,
but I think you got to set that. That's what I'm giving you an example.
Yeah. No, I like that.
So when you're talking about stuff, right now you might be in a period where you're super focused on your podcast and you're like, man, this is great structure for me and it's going, but suddenly I'm going to run a marathon in February in Austin, Texas, right? You're signing up for it. You get to visit a new city and you're really focused on it. So now you're going to shift, right? And you are going to start running 3 times a week early in the morning, and then but you got to be disciplined towards that goal.
That's a perspective that I don't think that I know a lot of people don't talk about, which I'm glad you brought that up. Because because a lot of these, business gurus and, big people are like, you got to get up at 4:30 a.m. You got to work out. Then you got to read 30 minutes and all this stuff. Like, yes, read. Yes, do those things. Does it have to be that? No. Find for me.
What they don't talk about in this stuff is you got 2 kids, and your kid wets the bed, and the other kid is sick, and then you got life.
Yeah,
life happens.
Life is involved.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure on people right now, which is totally unrealistic, to like be this like perfect version of themselves, and I think that leads to ultimately never quite getting, because you might be in this like 7 out of 10, like I'm nailing it. I do my journal. But you never shoot for that like intense period where you're going to do your training for your marathon. Like, what is it? I'm saying you're okay at 6 for a minute, and then you go to 8s and 9s, and then you might have a period where you're like, man, I just did that stuff. I'm gonna go easy on myself, and I'm not being in the 3s or 4s.
Yeah, and like disciplines change, and that's what I think is really cool. That like, I mean, because they should change with what your goal is. So like, if my goal is to run a half marathon or run a full marathon, we're doing a full. Then my discipline is training.
Change your diet. So, but don't beat yourself up if you're not doing that. So that's, if I could give 2 things from talking to you today, my thing would be sign up for something, learn language, move city, whatever you want to do, just do it and just work backwards. It's all in us. You've got to do the marathon. You got to just sign up. Right?
Yeah.
And you got to do it.
I will tell you, there's been, so I was actually doing the Kiowa half, or the Kiowa full. I was getting ready to train for it. Who told me? My sister told me she wanted to do it, and I started training for it. But it's so easier to give up on yourself when you're not fully committed. So like, I never signed up. I was like, oh, I'll sign up, in August or whatever. So I was training for it. And then August came around. I never got around to sign up for it because I had a wedding to go to. And then my training just stopped. Like, I just focused on going to the gym. So that's one thing that, like, get invested in. If you want to start a business, put a little bit of money into it or start talking about it. I think that's the biggest thing. Right, tell people about it. That works really well. But yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. So I feel like I need to do a freaking marathon now. So I want to end on this question. One, this has been so good. And I wrote this question down because I wanted to make sure I asked it right. What lesson did you learn about hard work and perseverance that you think can inspire others in their own challenges?
So I think lessons learned from, first, say the question again.
Yeah, no, it's what lessons did you learn about hard work and perseverance that you think others that will inspire others in their own challenges?
Yeah, the biggest lesson learned is what we've been talking about. Is just commit to something, whatever it is. I don't care whatever your thing is. Just commit to it, and then just consistently and quietly put the work in. And I think, again, I'm going back to the world where, like, everyone has to share everything all the time. And, like, but, like, sometimes it's a real beauty in just quietly putting the work in. And the perseverance piece, if you sign up, that's going to be a moment where you got to persevere through whatever that thing is. But my lessons are quietly do the work. It builds enormous confidence and self-esteem. You're not doing it for your Instagram followers. You're not doing it for whatever. Quietly, I said the best feeling that I've ever had in my whole life is crossing the finish line in Antigua. And I obviously see my family, but ask what it feels like to row an ocean. I say, it's in me. You can't take that away from me. I've lived this experience. I didn't do it for light. I've lived it, and so it's shaped me in a positive way, and you can't take it away from me. And I think in a world, no one's going to care about the car you drive, the house you live in. When I experienced death young in my life for people I love, so I think about it often, and I think when you're lying there, you'll think about the experience you lived, the lives you touched, and the people you helped. So do, those are the things that really matter to me. And I would really encourage people to do more of that in their life.
God, I'm so glad you said that. Cause that's my motivator. Is what motivated me to do the half is I said, if I'm lying on my deathbed, will I say, I wish I would have done a half?
Now you're going to say, I wish I would have done a full.
Well, listen, and then a triathlon was in there at some point. And
physical things, but it could be anything.
Yeah. Like, I mean, seriously, ask yourselves that. Like, don't lie on your deathbed and have regrets. And that's what this podcast is all for, is just commit. Just do it. Literally Nike can sponsor that.
And I think the failing piece is okay as well. Like, just, it's all right. That's okay. I think everyone... I have friends who are now so successful in their fields who who know, like everyone's like, man, what's that guy doing? Or like, that guy's done 3 things that haven't worked, and now they're producing critically acclaimed Oscar-nominated films and winning awards, some of the best restaurants in the UK, and they've had some failures. And I look at that and say, man, people write you off. And when everyone else was talking it up, you were just quietly in the corner, and here you are now, very successful also. And when everyone else was talking it up, you were just quietly in the corner, and here you are now, very successful also.
The quickest one to failure is typically the quickest one to success. The quicker you can fail, the better. But Passion Seekers, this was so good. I had a lot of rowing, but like such a great experience. Not many people, have experienced that or will ever experience that. So I think it was great to talk about. And this is the perseverance that it was in, but we'll catch you on the next one. Ben, thank you so much. See ya.